Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this Squared Up Coffee Break webinar. My name is Matthew Long, and this week we're going to be taking a look at hybrid cloud monitoring with SCOM. I am joined by Squared Up's founder and product architect, Richard Benwell.
Good afternoon, Matthew.
So we're going to be kicking off this year with a new format and a sort of a deep topic that we're going to be digging into throughout multiple episodes, hence why this is an introduction. So with that, I will advance the slides, and Rich, you can give us the elevator pitch on what we're going to be covering today.
Yeah, so we wanted to talk about hybrid cloud monitoring just because hybrid cloud is definitely a topic we're hearing about more and more from our customers. And I think even, as a customer, if you're not currently looking at using the public cloud, that's probably going to come onto your radar within the next few years, and monitoring is still a big part of that. So we wanted to kick off an initial discussion around this. So it's going to be quite an interesting webinar today. Hopefully, we wanted to run through, I guess, the broad scenario and really trying to look at the question of sort of what role does SCOM play when you do start to migrate applications to the public cloud. So kind of talk through some scenarios, where does SCOM fit in? And then we've got three demos to give. So probably in the sort of second half of the webinar, a couple of new solutions that we wanted to start putting together based on our initial investigation into hybrid cloud monitoring and talking about this webinar. So a nice new solution to look at rapid discovery for SCOM when using continuous deployment of VMs, a new management pack to discover Azure and AWS hosting environments, without having to actually connect via a cloud MP, and actually then looking at the cloud MPs themselves, Azure and AWS MPs. So first half, we'll just talk through some of the scenarios and some challenges involved. In the second half, hopefully dive into some demos. We're looking for feedback as always, so we'll keep the coffee break format. So we want to keep this sort of conversational. We do really encourage you all to participate either live on the chat, take our survey at squaredup.com/hybrid, or sort of follow up on community.squaredup.com or via support or the hello email addresses. So we really wanted to kick off the conversation here. So please do sort of participate. Let us know what your challenges are, how this fits with what you're doing in your organization, and help us develop these solutions so that we're all in a good place to monitor cloud resources with SCOM.
Absolutely. Right. In that case, let's sort of set the scene and talk about those sort of initial scenarios. So
what I want to do here is paint a picture of perhaps a typical strategy around a hybrid cloud and sort of a move to cloud. And this is based on what we have heard from a number of customers. So hopefully this will fit with where you are, if you're sort of on this webinar or kind of listening to the video, or may fit with where you will be over the next sort of few years, or perhaps where you've been if you're actually sort of quite ahead of this. So let's take, for example, your organization is aiming to migrate 10 to 20% of the workloads that you currently have on-prem in your data centers to the public cloud. And we hear that a lot, although organizations may be really embracing the cloud, obviously there is some time to migrate from data center to cloud, and people are looking at those sort of initial migrations. So whenever people do start talking about monitoring cloud workloads, it is relevant, it is really important. It's a high profile project within their organization, but it's still typically a very small sort of fraction of their entire workloads. Typically, also, we're hearing that organizations are strategically adopting a multi-cloud approach. So yes, they'll potentially be Azure first. They're initially moving to Azure, especially they've been a very sort of Microsoft-centric organization in the past. But rather than putting all your eggs into one cloud basket, you're also probably looking at AWS, and that either might be a top-down strategy, or because your development teams that you have within the organization maybe favor AWS for some technologies and so on. So you've actually got quite a sort of sprawl of application technologies and deployments. And then in terms of which applications are going up into the cloud, typically two flavors. So you're looking at taking some existing applications and migrating them to cloud VMs. That's infrastructure as a service. And that's sort of what's called a lift and shift operation. So you're not redesigning or even really redeploying that application in the sense of the VM layout. You're just trying to take all of the components that are currently on VMs and essentially move those VMs up into Azure, and sort of hope that when you fire up the VMs up in Azure, it sort of works equivalently. So existing application architecture and VM dependencies. Just you want those VMs to run on a public cloud rather than on your data center.
Yeah, for those of you who are sort of adminning long enough, that's basically the same as when you used to do the P2V migrations, right? It's the same sort of idea, taking what you're running on-prem, used to be a physical, onto a VM, same skill set here. How do we migrate an app? It's actually quite simple. That's a very relatively work thing we've done before. So actually for a lot of organizations, it's not a big reach. And this is their initial sort of gateway into the cloud.
Yep. And then, of course, the other sort of main type of applications are new applications being developed as cloud-first applications. And really, this is ultimately why you do want to move to the cloud as well, because new applications can then be deployed on top of both VMs, so infrastructure as a service still, but then start adopting platform services such as Azure SQL. So that's platform as a service. And of course, that is the goal of cloud-based applications, is that you can worry less about maintaining those Windows and sort of Linux VMs and start moving towards a platform as a service approach. So typically we'll find that sort of organizations are doing both. They want to migrate key applications up into the cloud and also start developing new applications on the cloud. So the question is you have a significant investment in SCOM. That's presumably why you're listening to this webinar. Hopefully also it's being very successful within your organization. Now you have Squared Up on top of that. You are hopefully monitoring probably your entire estate, both Windows and Linux, and potentially load balancers and so on. And you are pushing that out via sort of Squared Up, and you have your IT organization engaged with that. So you've made that investment. It's working successfully. How does that fit in with this strategy that you have? SCOM is seen as a classic infrastructure monitoring tool, right? That's where it's come from. That's what its heritage is. What role does SCOM now play in monitoring the public cloud? And that really is the premise, the kind of question that we're wanting to explore and find out. Well, does SCOM have a role to play, and how can it play that role?
Absolutely.
So in terms of what we will probably come back to and sort of refer to, we're not going to do it sort of so much today, but sort of I guess sort of over the continuing sort of webinars as well, is sort of take a typical sort of cloud app scenario. So you have an application team that's developed a new cloud first application. They've deployed it onto some VMs, so you definitely have still infrastructure as a service, and that's really our focus both today and sort of ongoing this year will be mainly infrastructure as a service, with a sort of nod to the fact that platform as a service is also being used, but still assuming that applications are being deployed out to VMs, but potentially say with an Azure SQL database using platform as a service. So your application developers are also pretty hip, right? They're using the cloud. They're up to speed with modern practices, potentially operating as a DevOps team. They're typically going to be using continuous integration and continuous deployment to regularly push new changes to production, and both to sort of pre-prod environments as well. So continuous integration is where, given a change, a code change to an application, you then build it on demand, and actually you've got a new version of that application ready to deploy based on, say, just one single code change. Continuous deployment is then, as well as building it continuously, you're ready to deploy it out onto a hosting environment continuously. So given every code change, potentially an hour later, you have a new version of your application sitting in a pre-prod environment ready to test. We do exactly that here at Squared Up. So every kind of code change we make to the product, just as a developer, gets deployed out to a new Squared Up instance ready for test.
And this is definitely one of the most attractive parts of this, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's a world away from where we typically have been, in enterprise infrastructure. We're sort of adopting virtualization. I've heard one of my younger members of the team saying, "What's this P2V thing?"
Oh God, that made me feel so old.
What does P2V mean? It's like, yeah, that's back in the day when we were all excited about moving physical to virtual. Now, obviously, it's moving those sort of virtual workloads up to the cloud, and also moving to platform. So it's a very different world now. Yes, we can provision VMs quickly, but actually now the modern trend is to automate that. So fully scripted, fully automated creation of VMs, deployment of an application out to that VM. It's then ready to connect via your web browser and use that application.
And the business is pushing them towards this, right? Because this gives them rapid code change, right? We have this new market, we have this new opportunity here, and we can realize that value very quickly, as opposed to the classic sort of cycle where, well, we can make a code change very fast, but it'll take ops 5 weeks to get it stood up and actually running in production.
Yep. And I think, really sort of maybe some more of a political part of the puzzle is that with application teams who have been either approved to deploy out to the cloud, or as part of a specific cloud migration strategy, are obviously going to be reevaluating other tools for monitoring as well. You'll have those application teams probably looking at cloud native monitoring, so Azure Monitor or CloudWatch, is it with AWS?
Yes.
The built-in monitoring with AWS. If you're familiar with those cloud platforms, you'd probably be exploring sort of the built-in monitoring tools. So you might think, well, that's good, right? I have monitoring in the cloud. I can get alerts directly from the built-in monitoring. Potentially also then attracted to very application-specific tools, APM tools like New Relic. If you are responsible for an application, especially if you're working in a DevOps team, you want to feel like you have the full picture, all the way down to code level and sort of SQL level queries. So an APM tool is probably on your radar as well from an application team. So that's the scenario. And again, as a SCOM administrator or the owner of the monitoring solution within your organization, what part are you playing and how do you engage with this application team? Before we get into the details then of what role SCOM will play, I wanted to then step back and actually just remind ourselves of what the goal is here. So regardless of where those applications are and actually sort of what technologies you're using to monitor them, really the ultimate goal is to provide your organization with a consistent, high quality monitoring capabilities across all those applications, and consistent being the key word there, right? So regardless of where those applications are, you want to provide your business with application availability dashboards and uptime reporting. Your CIO, other application stakeholders don't necessarily care specifically where components of that application are hosted. They want to know that application is currently available and has been. Then when it does come to managing issues, both from an IT management and a support team point of view, in the classic kind of sort of war room scenario of having to troubleshoot an issue, you want that end-to-end monitoring of application. You want to be able to go to one place to figure out where to escalate the issue to, which team to get involved, and where ultimately the change needs to be made to fix it. And for that, you need end-to-end monitoring, again, regardless of which hosting environment that application is in. And of course, really, for everyone involved in supporting that application, they ultimately need to get to detailed health and performance monitoring for all those components. And there's some screenshots of Squared Up there, right? We think this sort of fits the bill, and we are currently providing that application visibility for applications monitored by SCOM, typically hosted on-prem, but we want to provide that visibility for applications regardless of where they're hosted.
Yep. And actually, even for apps that are hosted purely in the cloud, we had that blog post from Stefan Roth a while ago where he was talking about like analytics and app insights, and he was saying like he has a customer who's embraced that and they're using it, but they can't get all the information on one screen in Azure today, and they're using Squared Up to actually deliver that.
Yep.
So yeah, even if it is just a pure cloud world, if those tools aren't appropriate, Squared Up could definitely help out there.
All right, so that's what we're aiming for. So is SCOM up to the job is the question, and why we're running the webinar. I guess another reason why we wanted to highlight this as a topic is there's a common misperception that cloud VMs, cloud resources, cloud applications need to be monitored by a cloud monitoring tool. And actually, of course, the case is that the fact that a monitoring tool is in the cloud doesn't make it necessarily any better or kind of worse at monitoring targets that are in the cloud, resources that are in the cloud. You have a cloud monitoring tool that can potentially monitor on-prem. An on-prem tool can potentially monitor the cloud. So you don't have to feel that your monitoring tool has to live in the same hosting environment as the resources that it's monitoring. So indeed, SCOM can monitor workloads within a VM, regardless of its host and location. We know that SCOM can monitor VMs that are on Hyper-V or physical servers or VMware, and they can be running up in Azure or AWS. It doesn't really matter as long as you've got an agent within that VM. It can monitor that VM. As with Hyper-V and VMware monitoring, you can extend SCOM to then also monitoring the hosting stack. So if you install Hyper-V MP, you get visibility of the Hyper-V hosting, same with VMware, and you can do the same with AWS and Azure. So in terms of monitoring VMs, really no change in some ways, right? You can monitor those VMs regardless of where they are. Just the fact that they're up in the cloud does not mean you have to throw out SCOM and start looking at a cloud monitoring tool. SCOM can also be then extended to monitor the PaaS services, such as Azure SQL, right? So you can then extend SCOM. Of course, that's what it's designed to do, is not just sort of monitor via agents. And really then, given that you have invested in SCOM, so the time, money, and expertise in monitoring with SCOM, you can retain that investment and then extend that up into your cloud. And I think this is the really important bit where I've heard some people talk about putting VMs up into the cloud and then looking at a new cloud monitoring tool, I'm thinking, well, hang on, you've still got, let's say, you're moving 20% of your VMs up into the cloud, you still have got 80% of your VMs on the data center being monitored by SCOM. Why would you necessarily then just sort of see that as the sort of legacy space and move on entirely just to a new platform for that 20%, when actually the bulk of your applications and your resources are still being monitored by that existing platform? So rather than throw that out, we'd suggest that you see that expanding to also capture your cloud-based virtual machines.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a nightmare to me. You spend quite a lot of time and energy tuning SCOM so that it's monitoring, like our web service. This is the standard that we apply to web servers. We know we get these kind of alerts for these kind of issues. Oh, now we've got a new expansion to the cloud. Well, let's start redoing that tuning all over again with a new tool. And now we have to maintain, we didn't get an alert from that system, but we do from SCOM. And yeah, that consistency seems really key to me.
And let's just be clear, if you have of the order of 1,000 VMs upwards, right? If you do go with a cloud monitoring tool, you're probably not going to be then also monitoring those 1,000 VMs on-prem with that cloud monitoring tool as well. So if you do sort of value that consistency and that sort of centralization, and if you are the monitoring team, you really want to be using the platform you've already invested in.
Yep.
And of course, where you actually use other tools aside from SCOM. The SCOM is not the be-all and end-all, obviously. ITSM tools, log analytics, APM. That's where Squared Up comes into the picture here, right? So with Squared Up on top of SCOM, but also able to aggregate data from other tools that you may be adopting. The suggestion here, the best practice here is that you're not in any way trying to hold off adopting those new tools, is that when you do, pull those into that same single pane of glass within Squared Up. So that gives this nice, continuous, consistent experience for your server and application administrators, right? They don't really want to grapple with new tools all the time. They just want to get on with their job and dive into a tool when they need to. At the moment, Squared Up primarily sits on top of SCOM, but of course you can extend it to put in other data as well as you roll out other tools.
Yeah, we've seen plenty of examples of that in the Coffee Break series previously with Splunk and ServiceNow and et cetera, et cetera.
All right, so let's get cracking then with some demos. That was sort of the scenario, and as I say, we'll actually be looking at this throughout 2018 and kind of coming back to some of the solutions. So we sort of set that up as a scenario ourselves internally at Squared Up, and Matthew's been spending the start of the year kind of looking at that and actually looking at some of the challenges. So when it comes to monitoring those cloud VMs, what you need to consider are security and network boundaries. So I guess typically we're talking about use of a SCOM gateway here if you need to.
So essentially, a cloud expansion is no different really than if you set up a new data center somewhere and it's an external site to your primary data center, and you need to actually have those VMs being monitored and communicated. Like you'd typically establish a site-to-site VPN, and that's what you see as a very common use case with that sort of initial 10 to 20% expansion. Create a VM. They're on the domain as well. Effectively, as far as those machines are concerned, they've got all your normal typical management agents on, and those machines just think they're part of your data center. And in those cases, like SCOM is a doddle to get configured, right? You just drop it on there.
In some ways, nothing new there, right? Yeah. Sort of monitoring VMs in the cloud and considering either non-domain joined VMs or sort of those network boundaries.
Now, if you don't have a site-to-site VPN, let's say, for example, the expansion is decided to be a greenfield. Look, we're not going to have the same domain. It's going to be a completely isolated environment, and that might be for either technological reasons, or it could just be for political reasons. Like, okay, actually, this team are going to have their own subscription, their own billing, and it's living in its own environment. And the app doesn't have any dependencies on the rest of our infrastructure anyway, so why do we need AD? Things like that. If that's the case, a gateway is kind of designed to do that, because again, a gateway is used in your DMZ where you might not have domain trust and you might have very restricted firewalls. Now, we're not going to go into the process on this webinar today. It's been extensively documented, but you can set up gateways very easily in both trusted and non-trusted environments. And you can also chain a gateway. So if you have a gateway existing already in your DMZ, you can create a gateway in your cloud network, point that gateway at the gateway in your DMZ, by opening up a public firewall rule, and then that can then talk to your SCOM infrastructure. You can do agent push from that. You can do everything you would normally. So that's actually a really easy way of getting that configured and working. And then what it comes down to, the big rub is your agent deployment. So then what it's all about is how do you get the agent onto that VM? And you can just do that manually as you already would. But as we talked about so far, like a lot of the power of the cloud is this sort of rapid deployment and configuration. So if you are doing manual agent push when you get your change request come through, that's probably not going to stand up in a world where VMs can exist for 24 hours and then go away just to scale for the holidays, for example. So here, either automating the agent deployment via one of your CD tools like Chef or PowerShell DSC, or whatever build job you're using, or baking it into the image. So if you're on like AWS and you're probably using your own machine images there, you can bake that agent in. So when the agent wakes up, it starts communicating with SCOM. So there's a lot of different options of how you do that, but you definitely need to consider some kind of automated approach, because otherwise you'll probably struggle to keep pace with these new applications as they come in. If you have a very rigorous change process, you might be okay, but I suspect you'll probably need to automate this. And again, if you look online, there's lots and lots of examples. My personal recommendation would be to stay away from Active Directory-based deployment. It's really slow and it's not worth the hassle. It's so difficult. So I really wouldn't recommend doing that. Now that said, that gets the agent onto the machine. The next sort of big piece then is, as part of this continuous deployment, not only is that VM rapidly being stood up, it's probably also being mutated quite a lot. So it's being scaled out, or it's having its configuration rapidly changed because, we need to add a new capability. Let's just install the new role and off we go. Like a lot of agile teams don't necessarily go through the same level of 5-week change control process that they might have typically done with on-prem resources.
So we'll check this out in a demo in a second, but the really key pain point here that we've heard many customers refer to is the slowness, the delay in SCOM discovery, right? So a new VM comes on board or a change to a VM, you then have to wait for SCOM to run those discovery rules that are then going to sort of build out the object model in SCOM, and then it's going to start monitoring, which is fine if you're deployed a VM and you then have some sort of phase in where then a week later it's going to go into production. But as you're saying, with a sort of DevOps style continuous deployment scenario, a VM could be provisioned in the morning, right, to ramp up for demand, or sort of a new update of the applications being rolled out. You want it to be monitored within minutes of it being set up, and then maybe an hour later, a day later, maybe a week later, it's going to be teared down again, and a new VM provision for a new update to the application, or when load changes. And we've had plenty of feedback to say like SCOM is really hard to kind of keep up with that, not fit.
You can mitigate it slightly by making sure that the agent install is the very last part of your build process. But again, like depending on your build tools, your build automation, that could be very, very challenging to actually achieve that. So.
Okay. And then the next one, I guess, is talking about comparing it with VMs hosted on Hyper-V or VMware. You've got an agent on these boxes. They're up in the cloud. What visibility do you have over the hosting environment?
So have we got Nathan on?
Let's get going with some demos. So the first one then, you bring up the slide and get some Nathan over. I'll do some talking while Nathan gets set up. So we've got Nathan Foreman sort of joining us on the webinar to give a demo of a tool that we've been looking at. So name to be decided, but essentially an interface into SCOM to allow continuous deployment tools to be integrated into SCOM very easily, so that whenever your application teams push out a new server, they typically will know exactly what's on that server because it's come from a template itself. They want to then push that server configuration into SCOM as part of their continuous deployment automation, so that then SCOM can start monitoring, collecting performance data for that VM within minutes of it being created, rather than having to wait the typical, hours or sort of a kind of a 24 hours for that VM to be monitored fully by SCOM. So that's the challenge, is to give an interface to an application team, a sort of DevOps style team, where you can say, okay, as part of your provisioning process, as part of your continuous deployment scripting, you can also provision out the SCOM monitoring for that new VM as it's deployed. So that was the sort of scenario. So Nathan, if you're online, hopefully you can hear us and we can switch over to your screen.
Yep, I will make you a presenter now.
Great, fantastic. So Nathan, we only have a couple of minutes, and really this was designed just as a preview, as a sort of bit of a proof of concept. Primarily here, we're wanting to show this off to the audience, find out whether people sort of share this pain point, whether they like the look of this this interface as a proof of concept, and hopefully get them engaged with being beta users and developing it further.
Yeah, that sounds great. Can you guys see my screen coming through there?
Yeah, we can indeed, yep.
So today we've got an example of a new web server that we're going to speed up the discovery on to work on getting that up to speed faster and the monitoring service in place. So this is my sample web server. It's just built from image. You can see there's no health service folder. The log's empty and the service isn't started. And if we go look at my SCOM instance, you'll notice there's no computer for it, no agent for it.
So we've got a new web server that SCOM's not currently monitoring, so it's new to SCOM.
To simplify that process, we've got a small exe that we've written that consumes data from a JSON definition, which we'll look at in a second here after I kick this off. And it's going to use that data inside of the JSON definition to install the agent and then speed up, or bootstrap as it's named, the discovery to get monitoring up to speed much more quickly. So it's going to start the process of adding an agent, and while it does that here, I'll pull up the JSON for an example. It was designed to have readability in mind. So when you go through, you'll see the SCOM classes that are required, and then the key properties and standard properties of those classes. It's a fairly large document because there is a lot involved in monitoring a server, but this is what gives your SCOM instance that head start instead of going through multiple layers of discovery. So it still takes 2 to 3 minutes to add the agent.
So while that's happening, the bit you haven't shown is to generate that JSON, you can point the tool at an existing VM. So you have a prototype VM that has the web applications on it, or perhaps the database on it, or the service on it. You can point the tool at that existing VM, export that JSON, and then as part of the continuous deployment automation, you can turn that JSON that you've exported into a template, modify the server name, based on the deployment script or the name of the application or so on. Save that as a template, and then use this tool as part of your continuous deployment to inject that data back into SCOM, but many times over, for example, right? You could be doing this for 10 VMs simultaneously if you templated that JSON file and modified the server name in that JSON file.
So the agent deployment succeeded, and the discovery data is created, and that's it. So it's pretty quick after the agent installation completes. And now if we go look, we'll see the agents in the agent section, but the more exciting part that would have taken a while, you'll now see that test server is visible in Windows Computer. And if we go look at the items that already exist under there,
so we got
you'll notice that all of the items that were in our template, expand these out, are unmonitored, but have been created so that the monitoring can start much quicker. So you now have your discovery complete at about 2.5 or 3 minutes from starting the process, and you've given a head start to the discovery and monitoring of this server.
So in that template JSON, you had the web application objects and so on, so the IaaS objects and the AppPool objects defined. So they should be injected straight into SCOM. So it doesn't have to run any discoveries itself. That data is injected, and then once it's injected, it should start to monitor that web application. So we haven't had to wait for SCOM to run discoveries to populate this object model. That's been pushed directly in because as the application team, you probably deployed a VM from a template anyway, or it's part of a chef script or some deployment script, so you know exactly what was on that VM. So you can tell SCOM what was on that VM and not have to wait for the manual discoveries. And then Nathan, not sure whether it is going to be the case, but we should then get monitoring and performance data for all of those objects now within seconds or minutes.
Within minutes on the test. So it's about 90 seconds usually. You can kind of see here we have most of the objects compared to what would take half hour to hour on a small server like this, and on a large SQL server it can take quite a bit longer. So
excellent. All right. Well, we'll cut the demo short there, just because we're sort of running out of time. We've got some good other demos to see as well. So I guess the reminder there is that was a sort of proof of concept, really trying to tackle this problem of SCOM discoveries kind of getting in the way of monitoring VMs that are dynamically provisioned and come and go. So if that is a challenge within your organization and that's something you'd be interested in, drop us a line. We'll get you beta access to that project that is planned to be just a free community tool. So get involved, help verify that, work with sort of Nathan, and we'll get that out in a public form as soon as we can, and probably run another webinar when we do. All right, thanks very much, Nathan.
So that's our sort of first demo.
Yep.
Our second demo is based around cloud VM discovery without actually having the cloud MP. So this is a project I sort of kicked off here internally, which was basically a response to how difficult it actually is when you're monitoring all your agents with SCOM anyway. You've already got like CPU memory monitoring everything else. What you want to know though is, which subscription, for example, is this in, or what region is this server running? Is this part of a cloud service? All those pieces of metadata that typically you'd want to know about. And likewise, if you had a VM, VMware or Hyper-V guest, you'd want to see that data from the host as well in your SCOM environment. But isn't really easily available by the existing management packs. And also those management packs are difficult to configure, and they're usually wizard-based, so they require frequent updates. They're not great for people who've extensively used the cloud or perhaps are in like a hosting and provider model. So what I did was knocked up a very quick prototype management pack. And what it does is it uses the instance metadata service that's available to basically all of the cloud platforms. Now they've kind of robbed it from each other. And the idea basically here is that each VM is able to talk to what is normally a loopback IPv4 address. Normally, if you hit that, you get yourself. But they intercept that request and actually send it off to a little web service that then returns data about that VM. And the beauty of this is because it's only accessible from within inside that VM itself, there's no authentication, there's no sort of like complex credentials or like records or anything required. You can just say from this VM, what region am I in? What sort of data is available, what subscription I am if you're on Azure, that kind of thing. So that's what I wanted to show you.
That was the magic, the details. So essentially, you have an agent on your cloud VMs. You haven't installed the Azure MP or the AWS MP, but you're going to get visibility of the environment that VM is running in from within the VM itself, from the agent itself.
Regardless of which subscription it's in or anything else. So even if you got like really bad shadow IT problems, this will find out the subscription the machine's on. So if I jump onto, let's say, I got one for EC2 and also for Azure. So let's say I go on to... so
hang on just 1 second. So this is a dashboard showing the VMs we have running in Azure and the VMs we have running in AWS without the need for AWS or Azure MPs, right? Just as long as we have an agent on that VM, we can see now where it's running.
Yep. So you can see, for example, here's an EC2 box that's a T2 micro in US EC2. If I click on that, we'll get the full breakdown here. So I've got its availability zone it's in. I've got the billing account that created it. I've got the AMI image. So now I can tell what actually this came from. I can tell what security groups it's in, its public and private host names and public and private IP addresses, if it has any. And also if I'm, then quite au fait with the automation on this product, I've got its ID as well. So I can actually use that to like run PowerShell commands to stop this thing. And I've also made it contained by its parent computer. So if I click on that parent, I can now actually jump to SCOM's view of this object and I can see, CPU, memory disk, and everything else I normally would. So now I get that lovely view of, here's a machine, I know which cloud platform it's on, I've got all the details I need to manage it on that cloud platform. If there's an outage or problem with it, I can probably now find out who actually owns this VM, where it is, and what it's used for.
So this is a squared up drill down just at a standard Windows computer level. We can see it's a Windows Server 2016 up in the perspective list there. We can see, well, not much else, apart from we can also see that it's an AWS VM. We're not going to click on that yet. We're going to come back to that. But having just installed that management pack, we now have visibility of which cloud platform our VMs are on and details around specifically subscription and so on. Great, fantastic.
So that was sort of the first piece. We'll come back to the second piece of that MP a little bit later, but keep that in mind.
And again, that MP, Matthew, is something kind of proof of concept. We're keen to get that out as a sort of beta to various people who are interested in trying that out and hopefully refining that a bit before we make that a public MP and share that out.
Yep. So if you're interested, get in touch.
All right. So that's broadly around monitoring of VMs up in the cloud. In addition then to sort of agent-based monitoring, we also want to look at monitoring the cloud platform. So in the same way as we'd monitor Hyper-V or VMware stacks, we also want sort of visibility of the cloud platform as well. So I guess the three benefits really just to sort of spell this out. So if you do have agents within the VMs, that's great. You get a lot of information already. You can then extend that with monitoring of the stack that VM's running on.
Yes.
Right. So you get the sort of information about the subscription and the availability of the region and so on. So if you're already using agent-based monitoring, it sort of takes that further. If you don't have agent-based monitoring, so if you haven't deployed your SCOM agents out into these VMs, you can actually use this in lieu of that, right? So you can get at least some basic information about those VMs from the cloud platform itself. So rather than from within the VM, you just ask the cloud platform about the VM. Typically what you can then integrate with the cloud platform's built-in monitoring, but what you're probably not going to get is the detailed monitoring of the workloads within the VM that SCOM gives you. So it's kind of like agentless monitoring.
Yep, or it's very similar, if you will, to if you import like the VMMP.
Yeah,
that provides all this monitoring of the the VM from outside the box, but it won't tell you about the server roles configured and that kind of thing.
Yeah. And then, of course, as I mentioned at the top of the webinar, forgetting for a second VMs, of course, if you're actually using, say, the Azure MP or the AWS MP, you can actually monitor then platform as a service resources where you don't have any opportunity to have an agent running within the SQL Azure instance, for example. So you can get some visibility of that from the platform itself.
Yeah.
So, okay, so I mentioned Azure and AWS. So they're the two management packs that are available and I guess of most interest, and you're going to look at. Just a quick one on the Azure one. That's not just one management pack, is it?
Yes, there are actually two there. So weirdly, the main Azure management pack monitors everything that's available, and actually it doesn't self-update, but it scans Azure for resources, and that's how it actually provisions things. So whenever they add a new service to Azure, it appears automatically. However, there is a specialized management pack available for Azure SQL that will then actually give you basically the same level of depth of monitoring at a database and instance level for your Azure SQL databases. So yeah, if you are taking those PaaS offerings in there, you've basically got nothing to lose by configuring that.
All right. So we're not going to look at today sort of deploying these MPs and the details of configuring them. We just wanted to see a quick look at what information you get, how that looks in Squared Up, and sort of what value that brings.
So if I jump in, so the key point here is that when you run this wizard, it examines your subscription or examines your account, and then basically, that's the wrong dashboard, then brings in those objects into your SCOM environment, and then enables monitoring, and you can choose like which counters and things you want. And as Richard mentioned earlier, you've got the ability to use the cloud platform monitoring there as well. So in the case of Amazon, say, you can enable CloudWatch metrics. So you can say if CPU goes to a certain point, raise an alarm, that will then be discovered. And I've got a box here that's showing unhealthy. If I drill down into that.
Just a second, with that dashboard, so you've installed the AWS MP, installed the Azure MP, it started to discover the VMs running from a cloud platform perspective, not from the agent perspective.
Yes, in that particular account or subscription I've configured it for.
And then you created a dashboard just to show those VM objects from a cloud platform point of view. And I guess the health is coming from, again, that management pack that's connected to the cloud platform.
Yes, it's using the cloud monitoring and then reflecting the same health.
So it looks very similar to the view you just showed us from the VM-based monitoring, right? So a similar set of VMs, but actually this is coming directly from the cloud platform.
Yeah. So you can see like we've got all the same sort of instance properties that typically my management pack harvests, but now we can actually see, because my management pack only exposes the properties, it doesn't expose the platform checks. So now here we can see, okay, how does EC2 think this machine's healthy? Like, and if I've configured, say, CloudWatch alarms, which I haven't for this particular VM, but I have for one of the other ones. What was it called? Apo 1. So that will show up here as well.
So the application team are very used to AWS. They work directly with AWS and CloudWatch. They're happy with that as a monitoring solution. In terms of sort of direct support of the application, you can actually surface that to the rest of the organization through Squared Up, through the management pack.
Yeah, and the same story with Azure. Like maybe they're writing custom log analytics events and metrics into log analytics that can then be turned into monitoring as well. So yeah, they can continue to work using the same tooling they're using, but now that's being reflected into
the rest. Yeah.
Now the last thing is, the only rub with these two management packs is they create their own objects. They're not linked to existing monitoring. So they're great for VMs where you don't have an agent on there. But if you do have an agent on there, typically all they kind of do is replicate a lot of the same monitoring. But if you only have one or the other, you're missing out on all the wealth of information you get from the other management packs.
So this tells you about the VM, but nothing about what's going on inside the VM.
Like just CPU memory, and that's basically it. That's not good enough. And likewise, if you're just doing agent-based monitoring, you have a computer object, but it can't tell if the instance is off because you've run out of credit or if it's just off because someone's powered the instance down. What I've done with my little management pack is I've also created a link between these two objects. And this is the cool thing now. So from this EC2 object, I have a computer perspective, and I can now jump to the computer in SCOM that's hosting this. So I can actually see, CPU memory and disk. This box is boring. It doesn't have any server roles installed. If it did, those would show up here now. And I can drill down to this, and it would take me to a Windows computer, which is effectively what the agent's picking up. And likewise, from the agent, I can see, oh, look, this is an AWS IaaS VM. I can click on that, and I get, this is a bit of a hacked up page, but you can see I get those cloud properties. I get my alerts and my monitors from the cloud instance. So effectively, no matter which way you come at this now, you have a consistent experience, right? Like if you are used to working with views that show Windows computers, you can get the cloud details that you need. If you're working at the cloud level with your app, you can now get that extra information that SCOM's surfacing that your monitoring product isn't normally surfacing up to you.
And then, of course, relate that to the distributed application levels, the app level where either you're drilling down from an app into a server all the way down into the AWS details, or up, right? Given an AWS group, or VM, you can then go all the way back up to the application that it's part of.
Let me just show you the same thing
Good
for
stuff.
the Azure one very quickly. So there's an Azure example. So it's a very similar thing. There's the cloud monitoring that's turned on for this particular box. As I said, we haven't enabled anything particularly fancy in this environment, but it kind of stretches the point. The other thing you can do with this is you can compare the two. So I mentioned at the top of this that it's for a particular subscription. You'll notice here that the Azure Computers list is much longer than the Azure VMs being monitored by the Azure Management Pack. And that is because this is monitoring one Azure subscription. If I have multiple subscriptions, how am I going to find the rest of these agents in my environment? So I can now use this and say, oh, look, actually, this dashboard shows me that I have machines here that we're not monitoring at a cloud level. Perhaps there's another subscription I'm not aware of. I can now go and configure that.
Yep.
Or if you're a hoster, this gives you a view into your VMs regardless of like which sub they're in.
All right. Excellent. Thanks very much, Matthew. So that's looking at the actual platform level monitoring. Just before we sort of wrap up, I guess, again, coming back to that overall goal of this, we went kind of quite deep dive there quickly into the infrastructure sort of monitoring and the platform monitoring, but to sort of back up again. Of course, the goal, certainly from a squared up point of view, is to provide a single enterprise application monitoring strategy across all your applications, right? Remembering that actually from a business point of view, they're not really kind of caring where these applications are. And typically from a sort of management and a support point of view, you don't at that point care where the applications are, right? Obviously each individual app team will, but you want to have that single enterprise application monitoring strategy regardless of whether your applications are on-prem or in the cloud. So in terms of what Squared Up's offering, obviously through Vader discovery and mapping of the applications, we're looking at the outside-in monitoring of application availability, again, regardless of where that app is. We then want to give you dashboards across the end-to-end health and performance of that application. And then through ITSM integration, show you issue management, change requests, and so on, CMDB information. Through log analytics integration, allow you to see change tracking, log file monitoring, security. And we're also looking at APM integration where you can then offer that sort of deep dive diagnostics for teams that need it all within that sort of single pane of glass. So some things that we're having the product already and also kind of coming in 2018. But the key point is that regardless of whether you still have all your VMs and your applications running on-prem or you're starting to migrate up into the cloud, Squared Up will be that single pane of glass for your operations teams doing their monitoring. So as you transition, Squared Up will still be that front end, and we continue to sort of see ourselves in that position and will support you across 2018 and beyond, as your organization is changing their strategy.
Yep. Now that said, we also need your help. Because this isn't a solved problem. Typically in these coffee breaks, I like to come in and say, hey guys, we've got this amazing solution. We've solved every problem. Well, this time we haven't. But we are committed to working with the community to try and solve these challenges. And we can't necessarily do it alone. So if you have a cool project or an idea or of an initiative that we haven't covered today that actually really helps in this area, again, we're trying to focus first on the sort of IaaS story of your initial expansion into public cloud. If you know about a management pack or you've got some really killer agent automation scripts, or actually you've embraced PaaS and you've got all these PowerShell scripts that do synthetic transactions so you can tell whether the thing's up or down, we really want to hear about it. Okay, we want to share that with the community. We want to make sure that everyone can benefit from that. So please do get in touch if you have either something you're planning and you want some assistance with that, or you've got something cool and you want it publicized. We really want to hear from you. Yeah. So come to us on community or send us an email at hello@squaredup.com. However you want to get in touch with us, please do so. In that vein, we run a community initiative, and we like to reward sort of our community sort of lighthouse members who do a really good job of helping everyone else out, right? Because it's your community at the end of the day. So we like to give out an awesome Lego prize because our sort of side business, along with monitoring, is also to sell Lego. And this quarter, I'm pleased to announce that Ruben Zimmerman is the winner of a prestigious Lego Star Wars kit. So that is winging
only
his way.
Because Jan had already won Lego last
Yes,
time,
I should point out that we can't just keep giving Lego to Jan. That would probably be a bit weird.
Sorry, Jan.
Yeah, I think maybe, I don't know if he'd really have the room in his house for like 15 different Lego kits. But anyway, that's going to be flying its way over to Ruben. He has put some amazing management packs onto GitHub for talking to things like F5 and a variety of other issues. So if you've actually used our MP community catalog, you've probably seen MPs there from Ruben. So Ruben, congratulations and thanks for all your hard work. Lego kit's winging its way to you. Now, with that said, thank you for sticking with us. I know we've gone long. I apologize for that. The coffee break sort of format in 2018 is going to be a bit longer than it has typically been before. So we try to shoot for half an hour, but we have gone over today. Apologies for that. If you missed it at the front of the webinar, please let us know your hybrid cloud experiences. Go to squaredup.com/hybrid. There's a short 10 or 11 question survey there where we want to hear about your experiences, where you are with your sort of cloud journey, and what your sort of experiences have been monitoring that with SCOM and beyond. So please go and fill that survey out. We're going to use that for not just coffee breaks, but also a bunch of initiatives that we have here at Squared Up throughout 2018. So it's really key to us that we get that data. If you are enjoying what you've seen today and you're new to coffee breaks and you want to sign up for the next recording, you can go to the microsite there on the screen and we will send you an email and put a reminder in your calendar, and every month you can get a link in and be on the live recording. We publish all the recording and the slides for this, along with other good content, at the blog at squaredup.com/blog. So check out, typically it tends to happen the day after, our blog for resources on this coffee break, as well as a wealth of other good resources in the SCOM and enterprise monitoring space. So it's definitely worth looking at if you haven't seen it before. And we have a YouTube playlist for this series as well, available there. It's a horrible URL. Just go on youtube.com/user-squaredup. And you'll see the playlist. We have hours and hours of good content on Squared Up and enterprise monitoring. We've talked about integrations with ITSM tools. We've got videos showing you to do that. We talked about log analytics integration. We've got videos showing you how to do that as well. So definitely, again, worth checking out if this is your first coffee break. Okay, as always, our engineering team are online, as well as myself and Richard. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put those into the chat and get those answered now. That's the sort of whole point of being here on the live recording. If not, thank you very much for joining us and sticking with us for this slightly longer coffee break. Thank you very much, Richard.
Thanks, Nathan.
And thanks, Nathan. Sorry.
Yeah.
We'll have to fly Nathan over every month.
Yep.
So he can be here in person.
And thanks, Matthew. Yep.
Thank you, guys.